Kick Michael.
Kick Michael?
Yeah.
Well, we'll leave him in, and if he joins in, if not. Right. So let's see.
Great.
Oh, we're live. Perfect. Okay. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Kipper stream, an extremely late edition because we've had some technical issues and also we've been waiting for Freddy. But we have you, Freddy. How are you?
Fine and raring to go, mate. Good to see you, Damien. Let's get up to mischief now.
Okay, well, why don't we go back into your past a little bit? Do you want to tell us how you got into politics originally?
Anger, mate. Frustration. Fed up with people saying, look, it's all screwed up, it's all effed up, and they're not doing anything about it. So I wanted to do something about it. I'd reached a stage in my business career where I didn't need to be in business anymore. Yeah, I wanted to be busy and so on, but I was just growing in anger at what was going on in Britain and in Europe and in perhaps to a greater extent the world. So that was the prime motivator. Also, I had finished really the things which I could do without being in a political party, which was using my skills as such as they are with computer programming and with writing to combat what was going on in the Daily Mail and in the Telegraph or the Tory Graph in their readers' columns, which was consolidated, concerted attack by the EU with the EU trolls. They were putting in hundreds and hundreds of comments every day. Hey, my program's put in tens of thousands of comments. They all disappeared. So the enemy went, and in towards the end of 2013, I decided it was the time for the troll to emerge from under the bridge and associate myself openly with UKIP. That's how it started.
And you have quite a long CV. I think, in fact, your CV actually
says... Oh, that's my brief version, Damien. That's the short one. That's the 2050 word one. My God. You youngsters, I mean, you're easily scared off. That's a mere 2050 words. Yeah, inside it are a few pithy ones, though.
Doesn't it say at the bottom of your CV, contact me for the rest of it, because this is too short for me to list all my jobs?
This is actually a reference to Pierre-Charles de Fermat, who was a famous mathematician who claimed he had proven what became known as Fermat's last theorem, which I'm more than happy to explain it to you, because I am a kosher, bona fide physicist and mathematician with first-class degrees, and it's the theory that the theorem that for the equation a raised to n plus b raised to n equal to c raised to n, where a, b, and c are positive integers, that means 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. The only solutions that exist are when n equal to, and also an integer, when n equal to 1 and 2. No other solutions exist. So a cubed plus b cubed equal to c cubed. You can't find any a, b, and c that do it. Now, Pierre-Charles de Fermat said he'd solved it, but he said the margin was too small to contain it. We don't actually think he solved it because it took many hundreds of years later. But a friend of mine called Andrew Wiles from Cambridge University, from Trinity, actually did solve it a couple of decades ago. And the proof was impossible to have come up by Charles Fermat. So he'd left there this famous note. The margin is too small to contain the proof, but I have proven it. So the margin is too small to contain the rest of my CV. All the stuff about tiddlywinks and pocket billiards and so on. But I've got the roller skating in, which Richard has reminded me of several times. But I was good at it. Still am.
Good stuff. So shall we get right into the nitty gritty then and talk about your leadership bit?
Nitty gritty. Great. Nitty gritty it is.
So UKIP leader, why are you standing?
Because I'll do a better job than anyone else. Simple as that. It requires a certain degree of ability, a certain degree of confidence, and a certain degree of stupidity. And I have all three in ample measure. Stupidity is important because on the face of it, the job would seem to be impossible. There are lots of people just saying, it can't be done. You can't do it. It's FUBA. You can't fix it. Yeah, these are people. But then, hey, I've won hundreds of chess games, or I've been told I was I was losing, and I won them nonetheless. Sometimes just persevering and thinking a bit deeper and sharper and harder. There are lots and lots of good people in UKIP, even a few who are slightly peripheralized, like perhaps yourself, Damien, temporarily, very temporarily. All of these things can be fixed, mate. But we can do it because there's no one else but us, you know. At least not in the UK. Relying on the Brexit Party, ha ha ha. Relying on the Tories, there aren't any Tories left there. There's some fake Conservatives out there. Who else is going to do this? We may have fallen to a position where the monster raving loony party has only got 38% more votes than we have, but we shall recover. We shall recover. So it requires a degree of, as I said, intelligence, self-confidence, and stupidity. In what measure, I don't know, because technically this task is apparently impossible. The SDP under the intellectual, God knows what that name means, I'm certainly not one of those, David Owen failed to do that in 1990 in Bootle, when his party was beaten by the monster raving loony party in a by-election, and the SDP never recovered. However, we are not the SDP. There is a reason for us. We will lure back the people who have left or who are marginalized or otherwise disaffected with UKIP, and I will heal the rift. Because there's the rift, it's very simple to talk about. There's people who believe Gerard Batten is utterly wrong, a complete, either a rogue or an idiot. And then there's people who think he's God. Now, I think neither. I was in the same position with Nigel. I don't do hero worship, mate. The last one for me was Batman. I was 9. And I don't know how good your camera resolution is, but I'm slightly older than that now. So it's 50 years plus I gave up hero worship. We're all flawed, myself especially, Gerard too. So mistakes have been definitely made. However, people who say Gerard's bad, they're off their rocker. Gerard's not a bad person at all. He's an honorable man. He's made mistakes, that's all. People who say that Tommy Robinson doesn't have any point, of course he bloody well has a point. It's a scandal and an outrage what's been going on in Britain and been going on here for 25 or 30 years. Every organ of the state and the fourth estate, the journalists, were complicit in this appalling nightmare. However, Tommy isn't God or a hero either. He's flawed, just like the rest of us. Building a political party around a figure like that is just a mistake. Simple as that. Heal the wound.
Well, great. I have something juicy for you, Freddie. I have a friend here on the stream by the name of Richard Cunningham, who actually said if you were to become leader, he would leave the party.
Good Lord.
So maybe you might like to break that down a little bit.
He's exactly the sort of person I need to talk about. Is it the hairstyle, mate? It's Richard, isn't it?
Unfortunately, Freddie, you and I are both in the same camp when it comes to losing hair.
Oh, God. We are high testosterone ones.
The unfortunate thing is I'm only 23. I just have bad genetics. But no, the real reason for it, Freddie, and I mean, I appreciate the fact, firstly, that you're standing. I think that, you know, it's a good thing that we actually have, you know, multiple candidates to choose from, unlike last time, where everybody sort of fell back. And I think it's good that we do have a bit more of a crowded field so that people actually have, you know, the right to choose a candidate that they all support. It's just, obviously, we all got our copies of Independence magazine through in the post over the last few days, and every single candidate got, you know, their space to talk about things. And what concerned me is where the other 3 candidates laid out policy. You know, they actually laid out where they wanted to take the party. Not all of our members are going to be watching the YouTube videos of the hustings. Not all of our members are going to be, you know, watching the Kipper stream. Not all of the members are going to be seeing the things that go up on social media, re your candidacy and so on. So when your platform, so to speak.
May I anticipate the question, Richard? It's obvious what you're saying.
If I might just carry it out to its conclusion. The fact that your campaign, the one serious core body part of your campaign is a letter from Stuart Agnew, and this is no slight to Stuart Agnew either. I absolutely love the man. I adore the man. He's an incredible guy. You know, it's a letter from Stuart Agnew, and a print of your CV, which, if I can guess the average demographic of UKIP to be somewhat in the 70s, that most of them will struggle to read.
If you can read it, mate, you're doing a miracle.
Well, but you see that this is my issue. It's that the vast majority of our membership are going to be choosing who they're going to be voting for on the basis of one A4 page in our party magazine, and what you have put, instead of there actually being any concrete policy, instead of there actually being any sort of like, this is the direction that we're going to start taking the party, it's a trust me, look at my qualifications, look at how well I do, I can do just about anything. And if I might just explain that point just quickly too before I pass this back to you, I have to explain my background of that. I'm a Christian, I'm involved in the church. The church has a massive problem with false teachers who essentially use the power of their person and their personality in the absence of any doctrine or theology to make their point and spread their influence. I find it to be an endemic problem within the church that you have people that want to carry on purely by their personality, and that makes me in turn in other parts of life very, very skeptical of people who want to progress and say, I know what to do, I have the plan, and then not actually reveal a plan and want to carry on purely on the body of their personality.
I've understood everything you've said.
I'm going to pass that back now.
Right. Now, if you look up 2 Timothy, I think it's 2 Timothy 14, maybe. I haven't got a Bible in front of me, mate. As you can see, I'm just standing here looking at the camera. But if you look at that, it says exactly what you've said. Do not beware of false teachers, who will come to you. They're like ravening wolves. Are you familiar with the verse in the Bible which says so? Beware of them. Now, mate, I'm not it. Here's my policy, mate. It's over here. It's the UKIP Manifesto. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't have to. I'm going to peek out over the top. This one, it's already there, mate. Why do I have to say anything more? It's there. It's the right policies. They're all correct. Maybe I tweak the wording of a few. Beware of false teachers telling you this is the new way we're going to go. It's not our policies that were wrong, mate. It was the implementation. It's not our hearts that are wrong. We are in the right place doing essentially the right things. We were doing it in the wrong way. It's as simple as that, mate. Now, if all the questions are as easy as that one, this is not going to be such an interesting evening as I hoped. Because now you hang on. It's my turn now. It's my turn. I'll let you go on. Now, thank you, young man. Now, what we have is an advertisement there in the magazine which shows a sense of humor, mate. No one in their right minds will try and read that CV, but right next to it, to the left, is an email address, which is in a different color as well. We are multicolored and multi-everything in UKIP nowadays. And it says, ukipfreddy@gmail.com. Email that one. I have sent out maybe 1,000 copies of that CV to people who've just written in and said, we want to read it. And I said, of course, I want you to read it. Simple as that, mate. So I can't put the whole thing in. I got one page. I think Stuart Agnew's opinion, which was unsolicited and I believe genuine and very touching. Stuart Agnew is somebody who is trusted by both wings of the party, both flanks, the ones that believe Gerard's always wrong and the ones who believe Gerard's always right. And I'm in neither of those camps. So that's why he was there. That's what I have pushed for. So if you've got a copy of the Independence magazine with you, you'll find right next to that micro-sized stuff, mate. Excellent. If you can turn to it and just point to my page and show them where it says.
Is it the bit at the bottom?
A bit more to the. Great. You'll find where it says ukipfreddy at the bottom @gmail.com. Email it. Simply that.
Yes.
Why am I not talking about policies? Because they're there, mate. The good policies are there. Yes, ukipfreddy@gmail.com, all in red. Because if anyone tries to read that, whether they're in their demographics in their 70s or in their 15, mate, there are a few sandwiches short of a picnic if they try to read the CV from that one. But thank you for your point. It has enabled me to clear this up.
And
go on.
Was I understand the point that you're trying to make, and I understand that sort of you're obviously relying on a degree of interactivity in your campaign, and that is, it is appreciated. at the same token, of course, you say, well, I don't need a manifesto because we've already got one, the party manifesto. Again,
Yes.
appreciate it. I love our manifesto. I do find it to be the best of all of them. That's why I'm still here. Yep, that very same one. Of course, however, we're in a position now where UKIP as a party, regardless of those particular items which we have, and I'm not belittling our manifesto at all because, like I've already said, I think it's perfect. I am concerned that, yes, you say that you're a unity candidate, but there's absolutely nothing in there that's demarking out sort of this kind of direction that you want to take the party, sort of which way do you want to go? And I find that that's a big problem that we have here. It's very easy to say, well, I'm going to pull everybody together. I'm the unity candidate. I'm this. And then go, well, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to push our manifesto. Well, some people in our party didn't like that manifesto. People who dedicated a lot of hard time and effort to the party are actually finding parts of that manifesto somewhat questionable. And don't get me wrong, I would actually be...
Which people? This manifesto was drafted. The interim manifesto is really the final one. The final one simply shortened a bit. It dates to September 2018. It was produced under Gerard's reign. Who in the party was disagreeing with it? I don't agree with you at all, mate. There's really nothing in it to argue about. If somebody's arguing with something in this manifesto, then I've really got to ask them, do they really want to be in UKIP? Sure, it doesn't have Tommy Robinson on every page, but what it has on the first page is Gerard Batten. Yep, it's about Gerard, mate. It's Gerard's manifesto, and it's a good one. The point is, the party's got sidetracked, and then Gerard finally discovered, hey, he's let the genie out of the bottle. The mainstream media were a bunch of, I think it's a word rhyming with bankers, but Carl Benjamin wasn't brave enough to use it. I mean, Carl and I have certainly cleared the air for the party, but they're not going to give Gerard a chance. The minute Gerard's on, they want to talk about Hitler saluting dogs. They want to talk about the supply of beer for the purpose of unwanted intercourse with Labour MPs, and they want to talk about whether people are retards, and they want to talk about all sorts of other crap, which is not what we want to talk about.
Well, so then, if this is the case, and
the manifesto is good.
I have to concede to a certain level of geekiness in this regard, in that I have so little of a social life that I have watched most of the hustings videos, which is incredible.
Good grief, explains a lot, mate.
My girlfriend's very
commiserations. I'm sorry.
So one of the things that I've also
found... somebody has to be into sadomasochism. Somebody has to be, mate. Somebody has to be.
And like I say, I'm very grateful to have a very patient girlfriend who just lets me do these things and just leaves me to it. So one of the things that I found though is that in those hustings, when when other candidates have had their talks, I think just about every other candidate has something in there about reforming the party, changing the structure of the party to make it more accessible to members. Well, these aren't things that you've mentioned, and it seems to be the case of whenever another candidate has mentioned something like this, you will then say, oh yes, no, I agree with it as well. And regardless of whether or not that those are good policies.
This is a version of reality which doesn't agree with mine.
Freddie, I think he's basically seeming like he's sending the message that you might be a bit of a false prophet. That's the message I'm kind of getting.
I wouldn't say a false prophet. You're very wary of who you pick.
Well, I'm not a prophet at all, mate, so I can't be a false one. I don't do prophets. I'm an agnostic. Yeah, I don't buy all that stuff. But I do tell the
Agnostics
truth,
for the win.
Yeah, I don't go into any of this other stuff. It's just the hard truth, whether you can handle it or not. Preferably if you can handle it.
Well, actually, the point
my turn now. You had your bit again. So let's go back to hustings. Look, we've got right. Most of them were grumbling about the NEC. When they talk about structure, they talk about the NEC. I have addressed this one. With the NEC, probably the best thing is just to leave it alone. Because if you change it to regional basis, you've got the problem that some regions in UKIP, like for example the Southeast, maybe Eastern as well, they have 10 times the membership of some other regions. So you'll create an appalling unfairness and imbalance if you try to give every region one person.
I can't talk to me about that. low membership.
So right, I'm perfectly aware of the region concern. So it'll have to be a mix between a sort of list. Yeah, this is a very serious point. It'll be a mix between a list and a regional basis. Maybe with the regional basis having a bias and maybe adding 2 or 3 smaller regions together. But you're then going to end up with an unwieldy NEC of 25 people. The actual main problem with the NEC here is that people are voting for somebody else who they've never met, they've never heard, they've never spoken to on the basis of a photograph. Thank God I've got more than my photograph to rely on, mate. And also thank you. Yes, absolutely correct. So, and maybe about 10 lines about them in the magazine. So they're making a decision on this basis. You're not going to get an informed decision. You're going to get a jury of 12 people, randomly selected. And juries aren't all entirely a bad thing. They're generally more reliable than judges, in my opinion. And nowadays, in the courts, we find this repeatedly. So people who just call for reform, they say, oh, the NEC is non-democratic, anti-democratic. For F's sake, the NEC is the most democratic structure in UKIP. The leader can hardly be called a structure, so I hope I'm not a structure if I win this. I'm just me. But the NEC is a body, a structure, and it is directly elected by the membership. What could be more democratic than that? The way in which it is elected does have defects, but then you're caught between 2 hard places. One is you have a large NEC, which is partly regional and partly non-regional, a list basis, like the Welsh Assembly, like the London Assembly. They have a system which we could follow exactly, but you end up with a body of about 25 people. Where are these people going to meet? Hey, that's where young independents could help, because I don't think everyone sitting around a table is necessary. We can have this meetings like we're having here. In that case, I don't care if the NEC is 25. It would be able to be handled, and we just use modern tech and do it. That's what I would do. I'm not a Luddite. I want to use modern tech. Otherwise, we have a small NEC, which is not representative.
What did you make of the NEC's decision to block Gerard from standing?
Good question.
I was actually on the phone to a long-term London member and activist. We were on a 3-hour phone call with him, and then he said, Freddy, you won't believe what's happened. This was about when the news broke to him, it was the middle of the night. If it had happened earlier, well, news came slowly to me in Chingford. So I looked at it and I couldn't believe it, because we've been down this wretched avenue before with the Stephen Wolfe matter, and it was really tore us apart. The Henry Bolton was nothing. It was an execution that had to be carried out. The guy just would not do the right thing, so we had to do it for him. He wouldn't go, so we went through bang, 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 all the steps. He made us go right to the end, perhaps thinking we were going to chicken out. We didn't chicken out. We held our nerve, and the NEC got it right then. With Stephen Wolfe, hey, one could talk a lot about it, but it's now several years into the past and we better move on. But I'd have thought they'd have found a way to avoid this. But if you want to know the real truth, I don't think Gerard wanted it. He didn't want it. When I organized London Hustings, he was there. This is before the NEC branch. I'd raised London Hustings immediately, and Gerard lives in London. Gerard's right there. He's a neighbor. He's a friend. I've worked with him for 5 years. I've worked with him on his 40 frequently asked questions. Argued with him endlessly, but hey, that's what we do in UKIP. We argue, but we're still friends. He didn't want to come. He wanted to send Richard Brain instead. I know I was with him during the campaigning this year, both for the local elections and then for the referendum. And really, he didn't want this fight anymore. He's been doing this thing for 27 years. He's been married for 31 and a half. I know this because I got sent pictures of his 30th wedding anniversary. Give the guy a break. I mean, I am younger than Gerard, but not hugely younger. It's about 5 years between us. But I've only been doing this direct politics madness for 5 years. I mean, he's been doing it for 27. Needs a medal, needs to retire, put his feet up, enjoy the wife, the life, the cat. Not the stress and pressure, ungratefulness, and so on. So that's my view. He didn't want to come. I said, look, is it the wrong date? I'll reschedule the hustings for London, whatever date you want. And it's only about 10 miles journey, literally 20 minutes. But Richard, it wasn't even him asking, it was Richard asking. Richard said, no, it's not that. So I said, Richard, well, what is it? Do you want another chair? No, Freddy. It's not that. He's not going to do it. So if he didn't want to do it, there's a saying about leading a horse to water, and you know the rest.
And if I, sorry, Seb, if you want to take over.
If this is on the topic, Richard, then go for it. I was just going to ask a separate question.
Well, I was just going to go back to talking about internal reform personally.
Let's not delve on it too long. So try and keep it pretty brief.
Yeah, I've got all night, mate.
I do think that it's important that these things need to be, that they are addressed, because I mean, so for example, you've given a spirited defense of the NEC. That's fair enough. I know that.
Not sure. I'm just saying they're a jury, mate. You're not going to like some of their decisions.
And this is it. And I think that's definitely a fair argument and well made. But what do you think about then the lower level? Obviously, grassroots has been sort of the byword, I think, of this leadership election. Everybody's been talking about grassroots activism, and then you've got obviously Ben Walker is talking about giving a lot more power to local branches to talk about merging and working together and stuff in a very, very free-form way. Mike Hooker is talking about policy development units. The party has obviously just started I'm not sure what the official name for it was, something like a policy development unit where members can submit policies that are reviewed quarterly. I just wanted to know really, firstly, what you thought could be done in regards to this kind of grassroots swell that we're talking about in this leadership election, what you can do to galvanize the local memberships, and then also why that's not something that you're pushing more in a campaign. Again, it's about the presentation and the form of it as much as the meat itself.
I think I've understood the question. It's a fair question. Firstly, the grassroots is the party. Everything else is almost superfluous. Without the grassroots, there's nothing. We're then a movement with subscribers, and good Lord, there's already one. It's called the Brexit Party. It doesn't have members. For good reasons to do with making sure members don't get a voice. With us, there's nothing but the members. I'm a grassroots member. I'm the regional chairman of London. I run it directly, hands-on. That means going out, knocking on doors, occasionally, one not that long ago, having to jump back from the door to make sure the door didn't make contact with my nose. But it didn't, but it was a narrow escape. Grassroots is everything that there is, but there's rearranging deck chairs is something which I, as a lifelong businessman, have an anathema to. You want to hear trite solutions? Mate, you want the truth? You can't handle the truth properly. The truth is we've been screwed over right from the top by stupid policies, stupidly put in, policies that are not in our manifesto, things which are an agenda which is different. And this stuff has caused us to lose the air war. We are being, I'm not allowed to use the word raped, but graped on the mainstream media each time we get on. As a result, not getting anywhere. You're talking about rearranging deck chairs? Well, sod that, mate. I'm a businessman who runs businesses, and I'm not an idiot who goes around saying, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change that, I'm going to change the other. I've never been part of a business that hasn't succeeded, and that's because I've never wasted my time with this sort of tripe and rubbish. So if it makes you feel better, mate, you do it. But I'm not doing it. Actually, the branches can run themselves. The social network between the social network between people, individuals, is the bedrock of UKIP. That's not structures, that's not rules, that's people getting on, like you and me.
I would contend that, and I would say that actually, as a branch chairman who moonlights as a secretary for a neighbouring branch, I know very well what that's like to actually try and work from the ground.
Yeah, I was the membership secretary of a neighbouring branch as well.
And so what I'm trying to make a point of here is that there does have to be institutions within the party that do provide for communication.
But they serve the grassroots, no other purpose.
Inter-party communications are atrocious.
Absolutely correct.
Connections between the branches and their DNOs and their regional offices is atrocious, and then the connections.
No one communicates at all. The whole thing's atrocious.
So how would you improve that?
But then you cannot say in one sentence that this is just rearranging deck chairs, and then also agree with me that this is a serious problem.
No. The changes about merging branches and so on. This is simply moving deck chairs around. That doesn't fix anything. Internal full change to the means. We've got a whole lot of people. They're right. The regional chairs meet up. I know because I'm a regional chair. I also have a very close relationship with my regional organizer, who is now called a regional officer because of the lawsuits which involved Helmer and Oakden. the two sets hardly talk to each other. They are completely different. The regional chairman, like me, in my case, I'm directly elected by branch committees, and therefore I have a degree of legitimacy that perhaps other regional chairmen don't have because they're elected by a county structure. But we represent the grassroots. Then we have a top-down system, which is the regional officers, who work effectively, as they used to, as spies for the party chairman. Now, fortunately, we've had two decent party chairmen in a row. I'm limiting the number to two. Tony McIntyre and Kirsten Harriott. And therefore, the spies aren't really spies. But before, believe you me, mate, it was spies. And no one talked to each other. These decisions were made. Then the NNO, who became Peter Staveley, who is currently so dissatisfied, he is my regional organizer. The only reason he is staying on in the party is in the hope that I'm going to win this regional contest. He was the previous national nominating officer. That means he raced off, chasing post office vans to get people's nomination papers in time for their elections. He was a hero. He still is. He's so pissed off with the way the party is going that he hasn't. But there was no communication after he was moved out because he just stood aside as NNO. Then people don't know if they've got a DNO. They don't know who the DNO is. The DNOs aren't talking to the branch structure people. They aren't talking to the county structure people. The regional chairmen sometimes don't exist, or they have overlapped with regional officers. What am I going to say? I'm going to say in an advertisement which then gets into the Daily Mirror that UKIP's all fucked up and it's got to be fixed? No, we keep our dirty linen in public. This isn't going out live, is it? The stream, ha ha ha.
I believe it is.
No, we are aware of these issues. Look, you want me to tell you in a few seconds how I'm going to fix everything? It's by being smart and competent and dedicated to winning, and winning for UKIP, not for me. I'd really prefer not to be doing this. I really, really would. There's plenty of other things to do in my life, but this job needs to be done.
And you talk a lot about. So okay, go on. You go ahead, Sebastian.
Go
All right,
Seb,
time for me to come in here. So I originally came on because I thought it wasn't spicy enough, but then the last few minutes have been nice and spicy.
Mate, it's going to get a lot spicier than this.
Fantastic, and I'm going to add the spice right now. So the question I want to ask, that we all want to ask, is what do you think of the other candidates? And I want you to not go, oh, they're all lovely. I want individual names and go, right, I know this person, I know him from here, I know that he's good at this, I know that he's bad.
I know all the other people who could have been candidates. They've all got qualities. They've got, like me, they've got pluses and they've got minuses. What am I to say? You want me to break rule N3 of the rule book, do you? Which says a candidate during an election contest who makes negative statements about another candidate gets eliminated. So, mate, hey, there you go. Good gotcha, right?
I wasn't aware.
Your intention, but you want me as leader, mate, because while I can't walk on water, I flipping heck know where the stones are, mate. So I'm not going down that route. They've all got their qualities. Richard Brain's a good programmer. I'm a better programmer, but the point is I can't be a leader and a programmer. So Richard Brain can do this. If you look at line, according to him, 673 on page 78 of my CV, you'll find digital precision, 150 software titles, which generally were ones which other people said were impossible. That's why I made enough to retire on, but before I was 30. Digital precision was not the only business I ran, far from it. There are about 15 other businesses. However, digital precision was, for me, that was my baby. So I can do software, I can do all these things, but I recognize these skills are present in others and I can't do everything. Further, I don't want to do everything. Successful delegation is the first and one of the most difficult things to do, accepting that other people may do it differently. They might even not do it as well, in my opinion, maybe, but I can't do it all, and they've got to have a chance to do it, and they'll get better at doing it then. So delegation.
We certainly wouldn't want to get you kicked out of the race, so we'll chair that one. But I suppose the next question would be,
well, actually,
they're a goddamn pain in the ass because they're not idiots.
Let me just butt in there quickly, actually, because I think Richard Brain, being the good sport that he is, would not mind a bit of criticism from you, Freddie, since you are quite chummy with each other. So
what am I to say? Richard is my best activist in London. When he asked, should he go for being a branch chairman? I said, go for it, mate. He couldn't have gone for a county chairman because by the time he got to the position he could have, I'd have already abolished the counties in London, which were really a UKIP fiction anyway. When he said he's thinking of going for regional chairman, i.e. taking me on, I said, go for it, mate. He didn't need to ask me am I going for leadership. So what am I going to say about Richard? He's a great guy. He's a fighter. He's not me, though. Our backgrounds are different. There's a huge overlap. He's got a second in physics. I have degrees in physics and maths with a first. That sounds like one-upmanship, mate. Well, I suppose it is. He's totally into photography. So am I. Our skills are roughly equal. I've seen his work. I know my work. In technical stuff with graphics, again, both of us are equal. But artistic stuff, he's way ahead of me. He is way ahead of me. If I'm a 3 or a 2, he's a 10. Or if not a 10, he's a 9. Maybe a 9.5. Right? So he's much better than me in that. So the overlaps are large. Physics is more a hell of a coincidence to begin with. We physicists are few and far between. Go on.
But what do you think about Richard Brain being quite open to talking about the differences between Islam theology and things like that? It seems like you don't really want to get stuck into these kind of nitty-gritty
Islam
subjects
theology, right.
quite as much.
I'll give you a statement straight away as an agnostic. Look, I don't buy into any of this stuff. However, if we look at the New Testament on the one hand, yeah, I know the Bible better than any of the further than anyone else in UKIP I've ever met. So let's look at the New Testament, put on one side, and I do mean that, mate. Plenty have tried. Plenty have tried.
I can see Richard's face. We need to arrange another stream.
What? With Richard and I about the. It's no contest, mate. My favorite aunt became a Jehovah's Witness. I learned to argue with the Jehovah's Witnesses when I was about 13, and I spent 3 fruitless years arguing with them, up, down, left, right, the other, when they twist the Bible and so on. The Jehovah's Witnesses aren't Christians. They don't believe Jesus is God, which is a fundamental definition of a Christian. So, but knowing about how to argue with them gets one very familiar with the Bible. I mean, the Bible, which most people would call the Bible, not their rewritten New World Translation. So this is not
Richard.
On the Bible? That'd be ridiculous.
No, I'm interested, actually.
But let's go on to the facts. The difference. You asked me about differences. You've started off with a false premise, which I'm going to squash. Right. You want differences between Christianity and Islam. The New Testament, not in one single place, nowhere in it, does it give man the responsibility, let alone the obligation, let alone a commandment, to set right or punish others for religious sins against the religion itself. Not in one place does the New Testament say that. In fact, the closest it comes is when Peter tries to defend Jesus in Gethsemane, and but Jesus says, "Put away your sword. You are not to do that." Islam, unfortunately, obliges Muslims to punish others for religious wrongs, that is, wrongs as defined within Islamic scripture. This is very worrying and troubling to people like me. However, the vast majority of Muslims, the overwhelming majority of Muslims, have no intention of doing anything like that. They just want to have common, happy lives just like us. They want to go on, get a crust to eat, have a better life for themselves and their kids, and a safe and secure life. So, however, if you're talking about theological differences, they are enormous differences. So, to highlight it, the New Testament, not in one single place does it give to man the power to punish. In fact, that power is specifically, explicitly reserved to the deity, to God. In Islam, that is not the case. Note, I am saying the New Testament, and I am ignoring the verse in Timothy which says all scripture is beneficial, because that would say, hey, you've got to look at the Old Testament as well. And I'm relying on simple, plain 101 Jesus, who says 2 laws, mate, 2 laws. Love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself, and that's it. And if you do that, the rest of the law of the prophets will fall behind you, rather than looking at specific Pharisee-like individual verses of the Old Testament, which contain some pretty ghastly stuff as well. So
if I were to give you a quick hypothetical scenario, say you were the leader of UKIP, and let's say there was a mass shooting at a gay nightclub by a Muslim, would you be prepared on the mainstream media to make that link between Islam and the killing of gay people?
I wouldn't see why not, if it was relevant. There is a fallacy which is called the no true Scotsman fallacy. I'm going to I'm sure all of you know it, but perhaps some of your viewers don't. The no true Scotsman fallacy is that no Scotsman can ever be guilty of anything, simply because if he was guilty of that objectionable thing, he wouldn't be a Scotsman. He wouldn't be a true Scotsman. Now, there is an obvious parallel here to something else, which I'm not going to necessarily say, but I leave it to you to consider what it might be. If the answer is, well, he can't be a true Muslim because of this, that, and the other, and then we have, of course, the tafsir, which is the doctrine of by which you contrast verses which seem to be contradictory, and you choose the one that wins. Now, people who want to use tafsir to reform Islam to be a more compatible religion with, let's say, Western culture and values, then when you're doing your tafsir, you take out the stuff which says kill the kuffar wherever you can find them, which and similar abjurations occur about 112 times within the Quran itself. That's not counting hadith, which is pretty nasty stuff. So look, I'm not here to sell the Quran to anyone, mate. I'm not. I've read the book 2 and 3, 4 times, and I find very little in it to take comfort. But individual Muslims don't worry about this. They don't think about it. It's not the center of their lives. Muslims don't even go to the mosque or anything like that. They just want a quiet life, and they call themselves a Muslim just in the same way my mom would have probably. If it was put to her, she believed in doing good stuff to people and not harming them, and so on and so forth. Did that mean she went off to church? Did that mean she went? She launched into Hail Marys or stuff like that? No way. She just talked about love and loving, and better than that, didn't talk it, did it. Most Muslims are Muslims, I believe, in the same sense. They don't go looking up which verse, which surah in the Quran said some particularly ghastly thing. And the Quran certainly got quite a few.
Of course, I think it's just, I think there are a lot of members that are worried that when big things happen like this, mass shootings and things like that, that people will not speak truthfully about this because they don't want to upset people.
I'm addicted to speaking the truth, especially when it upsets somebody. So, and it makes him, yes, well, that's not really true, but it's not going to be a deterrent. I may try and gild the pill a bit, but only a little bit. Right, so let's give you a history lesson, mate. My mum's English. My dad's Parsi. Who are the Parsis? Well, the first great world empire was the Egyptian one, followed immediately, which lasted a long time. It got learned writing, lots of other ghastly stuff, just like the graphics that keep coming up on screen there to frighten me, but I'm too hard to frighten. Then the Mesopotamian one, or what we now call the Iraqi one. It lasted a very short time, but they gave it papyrus, they had Hammurabi, they had flow on cash, on bound, deep discounted bonds, and they're pretty financially up with it. Then came quite a lot to intellect and learning, but also into invading places. So they headed up, when they were invading, they didn't really go far east, but they certainly went west. They went into Central Asia, and they went west into Europe. But pretty quickly, they hit the Spartans, and I think they thought, gee, but if all Europeans fight like the Spartans do, this is one bad idea to invade Europe. So they sort of gave up, and this is about 2,500 years ago. Yeah, approximately. That was the peak of the empire. They then withdrew a little bit, so and maintained their borders. They went into Egypt. They controlled those areas, and it was a big swathe of land. Now, what is the underlying religion? Because there was a religion. It was Zoroastrianism. Now, if people are into theological stuff, and hey, I don't believe religion, politics, and myth, but if you want to have Zoroastrianism, mate, you add the Old Testament stuff to Zoroastrianism and you get Christianity. The golden rule comes from Zoroastrianism. There's no doubt about it. And I'm not peddling you anything, mate, because I'm an agnostic. It's all fairy tales to me. The golden rule, the very important rule, how do you treat others? Don't treat them as you think God wants you to treat them. Don't treat them as you think you should treat them because of some religious law. Don't treat them like you think they deserve to be treated. Treat them like you want to be treated. And that simple rule is the basis of Christianity, and that was there in Zoroastrianism for at least 500 and probably at least 1,000 years before Christ. The 3 wise men who came to give gifts to Jesus, most theologians, I'm certainly not that man, I'm just a common garden physicist, but most theologians would have said those 3 wise men were, they were magi. The magi was a word from which we derive the word in English, magician, were wise men from Persia. That's what magi means. They were passing on the wisdom of another monotheistic religion. The two oldest surviving monotheistic religions in the world today are Judaism and Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism seems to be about 50 years older in terms of artifacts. That's according to the Encyclopedia Judaica. I do know this because, as all good agnostics need to know.
Freddie? I think we've lost him.
That's another unfortunate screen freeze, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, we got a reprieve.
What was the question again?
Oh,
Yeah, I got
oh,
I'm
back.
back.
Yeah, we have you now, Freddie.
It was
Please,
clearly
carry on.
behind
Should
intervention.
we keep this conversation moving? Should we keep this conversation moving? Because we just
Let me finish this anecdote. You go fast through it. Right. So my paternal ancestors, right, we're going back 2,500 years. They met the Spartans. They said, "Sod that. We're not putting up with this anymore. We might be able to beat them with numbers, but if the rest of them are like that, then we're not going to win." So they stopped being nasty empire. They started to be benevolent empire. Good King Cyrus and so on. For those of you who like bashing a Bible or two, you'll find the references all there in Scripture. Cyrus was a Persian king, as was Darius and so on. So they withdrew to their boundaries of their large kingdom, and then thereafter they devoted themselves to learning and so on. They had a huge Jewish community living in peace and harmony within the Persian Empire. They were allowed to practice their own religion. There was no religious sanctions on them. Yeah, I'm not saying it was all roses. Certainly wasn't. It wasn't a democracy. It was an empire. It was a dictatorship. I'm sure there were lots of issues, but that was a long time ago. When Christianity came around, there were 500 years of Christians living under the Persian Empire. Then my ancestors made the assumption that this new faith springing forth from the deserts of Arabia was about the same as Judaism and Christianity, and we'd have a new, more interesting debate with, instead of just 3 people debating, we'd have 4. It didn't quite work out that way. They were annihilated. They did not maintain immigration control at their borders, mate. They were infiltrated. Within 20 years, the Persian Empire was over. It was simple as that. It was over, finished, gone, done, never gone back again. It was a genetic invasion. The women were sex slaved out. Hey, nothing. That was 1,300 years ago. You might think nothing's changed since. The smarter ones fled west into, or northwest into Europe, in which case they disappeared because they were a Caucasian race disappearing into Europe, and some got into boats and fled to India. So anyone telling me that I have to have lessons about the nature of Islam, it's about as offensive as telling a Jewish person, you know, 1 or 2 of the Nazis were a bit nasty, but you're probably a bit thick and you don't know it. So.
Oh, well, I was never accusing you of that, Freddie. I was just curious.
I'm merely being
Freddie, on the topic of migration, Freddie.
Yeah, the big one, the elephant in the room.
Yeah, the elephant in the room. One of the things we've heard you say is obviously you can't walk on water, but you know where the stones are. How do you feel the mainstream media will react to your...
They'll react furiously, and I love that, mate. You make life difficult for me to be such like all of you are, and try and be like mainstream media.
Let me finish the question. How do you think the mainstream media will react to your turn of the phrase Londonistan in particular?
It's not an original one. It's Melanie Phillips, mate, from about 20 years ago. I hope they react in the way that they would be expected to react, in which case I'll make mincemeat of them. Because it is true now. We've gone the wrong way, mate. Look, what do you call a Somalian who doesn't mind visitors coming to Somalia? He's more than happy visitors and so on, perhaps even wanting to stay in Somalia, parts of which are actually really nice, and Google Images will show you that. But he still wants Somalia to be for Somalis. You call that person a Somali. That's what you call him. Ditto if the person was from, let's take another continent, a Malaysian. What do you call a Malaysian who believes, yeah, of course we want visitors, we want residents, we want people who are willing to settle and not, for example, take up our citizenship. But we still want to remain essentially Malaysian. We call such a person a Malay. But what do you call a person from Britain who wants that? You call him an effing racist. And that's just bloody wrong. And if you think the mainstream media are going to be able to get that one off me, then I'd have to be a lot thicker, not just than me, but any of our candidates.
So, Freddie, you talk about how you're going to put the message across. And from what you've told me about speaking tough on difficult issues, it sounds to me a lot like what Gerard Batten did. So how would you be
No, it
different?
doesn't. No, it doesn't. It
Okay.
doesn't at all.
Well,
Gerard's
please,
fallen
please-
flat on it.
please enlighten me to how you would be different to Gerard Batten and how his approach was.
There's you're asking about chalk and cheese, mate. I'll talk about stuff which is based on scientific, technical information that I'm willing to provide instantly. Rumors that I have Google permanently installed in my right temporal lobe is they are completely false, spread by scurrilous opponents of mine from somewhere or the other. But it sometimes may seem like that. At the Birmingham hustings, mate, Mike Hookham said man landed on the moon exactly 50 years ago. Set foot on the moon, and I said no immediately. He didn't. He got it wrong by 2 days. Someone in the audience said, well, Freddy's wrong as well. He got it wrong by 4 days. No, it wasn't. I was right. They were wrong. They looked up the wrong thing in Google. So that stuff is what wins on the mainstream media. You try beating me and then tell me, you've beaten me and therefore the mainstream media will beat me. Because until you do that, it's just theory.
I'm sorry, this is pedantry.
It is not pedantry, mate. It is winning. This is what wins debates.
Talking about your qualities as a leader, as a potential leader for the party, not quibbles over odd jabs in a leadership hustings.
No, it's not. But the mainstream media war is what. No, I was asked the question: what would be the differences between your approach and Gerard's approach? Do try and concentrate. Try and keep up, Richard. Now, that was the question.
A set of essays, please.
The answer to that question, mate, is that I will take on the mainstream media and beat them. Well, Gerard clearly hasn't done that. He's packed up, thrown his toys out of the pram and walked off a studio. That's dreadful. That's conceding the ground to the enemy. And that will be played again and again. And that is why we have to have a clean break with the past. I'm afraid Gerard screwed up on the media. You don't do that. He allowed them to bring up this non-stop topic. Now, I've had to deal with the Tommy Robinson matter 3 times on the BBC Radio. All 3 times I won. That's the difference. I didn't concede any ground to them whatsoever. I conceded immediately that Tommy Robinson was no great hero. He was full of flaws. He got a charge sheet as long as my arm. When they said he's done this and he's done that, well, I know his charge sheet pretty much by heart, so I was always able to add one more. And I said, why did you leave that bit out? But the point is, Tommy Robinson does have a point. And then I asked them, is it that you don't know that he's got another point, some central thing to argue about? Is it that there isn't one? Or that you don't know it exists, or you're not that it exists, or you're not sure. And they've tried each one of those with me, either yes, no, or don't know. That is about Tommy Robinson's main acts.
On the topic of the media.
Sorry, say again?
On the topic of the media, what it seems clear to me is they like to get the candidate who they think is possibly threatening, Gerard or yourself, or whoever else it might be. They pick one characteristic about them and they'll hit hard. Say it again, sorry.
Yeah, you're completely correct. That's what they do. Don't play fair, mate.
So the point I'm trying to get here is when they had Gerard, they thought he was a racist, Islamophobe, whatever. And when he was questioned, the only thing they picked up on was, what's your opinion on this to do with Islam, this to do with Islam? That's all they focused on. So the point I'm trying to make is, I think with you, they might sort of say you're a bit eccentric, maybe even a bit crazy. So how are you going to get the conversation away from your craziness and get onto the topic?
I'm not crazy, mate. I happen to have an IQ of 175. You've probably not met too many of us, because if you believe the statistics, which are all rubbish, that's about 1 in 3.6 million. So you probably haven't met one. I'm not eccentric. I'm just being slow and helpful.
So,
the mainstream media, they won't know what hit them, mate. They will not know what hit them. They try and take the agenda they already have. I didn't make the Tommy argument. I wouldn't have gone down that route in the first place. However, I've had to deal with it, and each time I've won. I've not backed down and I've not gone off, because I've taken them on the central plank. Is Tommy's main thing, his main theme, no matter how incompetently, perhaps illegally, he's carried it out. Is he actually wrong about the main thing he's banging on about, which is this country has had a problem with all the organs of government, plus the fourth estate journalists, not covering and not exposing what is a massive problem and leading to other problems. Tommy Robinson is definitely not a racist. There's no way he is. He's certainly not far right. He's none of these things. What he is, he's a pain in the ass. Quite a few of us are, and he won't give up, and he's persistent, and he's not careful. He's careless, and he's got a heck of a temper. We understand his defects, i.e. he's human, not somebody to base an entire political party around. That was the central flaw. But Gerard allowed this. Why didn't he win?
So
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Well, if this is the case, and but do not get me wrong, I have actually agreed with just about everything that you've said in the last.
Which is why you're not going to be leaving the party when I win.
Well, no, I was actually just wondering why this didn't feature in a manifesto. This is my point. This is the exact issue.
Feature in what manifesto?
If I might, Freddie, the whole idea that I'm going for here, this is kind of the whole thrust of my argument, is that a lot of the things that you're saying, very, very good, and I'm not about to disagree with the things that you have said in hustings. In many cases, you have said very good things. My issue is that whereas other candidates have provided very much a roadmap to the success of the party that of UKIP, they've provided the roadmap that they want this party.
Yeah, we've done this one before, mate. We've done this one before. We don't need to cover it a second time.
But it's still a pertinent issue, because with all of these things that's come up, you obviously are a very intelligent man who's got a very large platform. There's absolutely no point having that platform purely in here. It needs to be in print. It needs to be in the public eye.
In print? Mate, get with the times. We're digital electronic print. Good Lord, man. You don't mean print. You mean get them out. I don't care how I get the message out.
If you look at the average demographics of our party, then you'll find that I would say a considerable majority of them will be getting it from this. We get maybe 1,000 people on a very, very good day watching a Kipper stream. So that's 1,000 out of what, 28,000 we're on now.
Richard, you're telling me how to win a leadership contest.
I'm not.
Is this really sensible?
Contest, but I'm telling you that I think that there are things that are being overlooked here. I don't think that there is.
Great. May I answer you? Since you're obviously, I should have appointed you my campaign manager, clearly. I'm not being sarcastic here. I didn't have time to do it, mate. I'm running a region at the same time, a complex region. London has maybe only about 15% of UKIP's membership, but it has at least 50% of UKIP's issues, because we are fairly opinionated a lot, and we are forever, it's ferrets in a sack in London, non-stop. Half the people you would have talked about as being prominent in the party in all sorts of controversial capacities are based in or around London. That's life would be a lot simpler for me if they weren't. I'm not complaining though. So you're basically telling me my message hasn't got across, in which case I'm not going to win. So all this is completely irrelevant. However, you have overlooked another. It may be, Richard, just let me finish, mate. You're not the leadership candidate. Let's take this from the beginning. Let me answer. I understood your point. I have sent out 3 million emails since the end of 2015 with this ugly mug at the top of it. They have the same header that's here. I don't know whether this can be seen easily, but they have that header at the top. Now, if those members remember that, they'll know I wasn't just a talking head on Kipper Central. It didn't exist back then. My stuff goes back, and 3 million emails sent out to UKIP members, of which approximately 59% were opened. We know that because we put trackers on the stuff. They all had that at the top. They don't count in the 59% if my photo didn't show up on their computer, because it's done by, I'm sure you know all about this. It's done by graphics tracking. So if they've got graphics suppressed on their email, like I do, it wouldn't show up as being opened. I'm talking about 59 were opened. So that is my strategy and platform. I didn't have much time for this, mate. I was fighting other things. We are in London fighting an existential battle in UKIP. It is the toughest demographic we have in London. So, and I have been handling that. I've also been having to look for somebody who will take over this job. Regional, because the chance of being a leader and the regional chairman of London is impossible to be. Impossible. And I don't want Richard Brain to be the regional chairman in London, because he has national duties which are far more important for his skill set. He can help nationally in all sorts of ways.
Do you have any idea who you would appoint as your deputy?
I'm not getting into that stuff at all. Certainly not, because then it's going to be twisted and spun. It can be twisted and spun that I'm looking for favors, and I don't do things like that. I'll appoint the best person for the job. I've got a few people in mind, people who have come to me, and there have been a few, who have come to me and said, you want my endorsement, then blah, blah, blah. They find that, unfortunately, Freddy is not the Freddy that Londoners out. We've had enough of that corruption, all of that extremely nasty, it's not who you are, it's who you know stuff within UKIP. I don't do that.
I'd like to bring.
Go on.
Sorry, I'd like to bring Michael in because I know he has a question for you.
Yes, I was going to comment on the video you did with Sargon, and then you were challenging him on freedom of speech. And yes, and you were challenging him on, whether free speech has its limitations and when is it appropriate to say what you really think and whether it's wise. And the one thing I really took away from that, and it's been brought up a few times on the stream, which is the phrase or the statement, being able to walk on water because you know what the stones are. And I found it really quite enlightening about like when is the right time to voice the truth and when people are going to be willing to listen to it. And I was just wondering, like, would you be able to elaborate more on that? And how would you interpret that into how you'd be a leader?
Of course. Let me say something which you may not know. It was a terrific team. There were 4 of us there in the room doing this, plus an air conditioner that was rather noisy. It was John Wong and Callum Darragh, and of course Carl and myself. At some point during this, it came up that actually at whom I'm having to choose my words carefully here, at whom Carl had directed his comments, had gone to the police and had complained that this was a matter of harassment of this person and being very gender non-specific and so on. So we had to have breaks and reshuffles because Carl was concerned that something he might say could then be used in a police investigation against him. There was certainly no civil matter. There was no libel or anything like that. This was police matter. The whole theme over there is I don't want any legal restrictions on what Carl says, because nothing which he's done, in my opinion, A, breaks the law, nor should the law be changed to make it that it isn't. I'm more of a free speech advocate than Carl, and if you get Carl on there, he'll tell you that. I'll go further than Carl will. But the question is being smart. There is nothing to be gained by telling a lady and her daughter, one or other, suspect both, may have suffered from something like Down syndrome, to tell them, I'm sorry, my dear, but you have to face it. You are a retard. That is just crass. It may be true, but what's the point in saying it? What possible benefit does it give? Does it help them? Does it help you? Does it help anything else? If you want to say the truth, hey, I could come up with a whole lot of truths. They're pretty unpalatable. So could you about me. You could tell me I've got an ugly mug, except that I know it already. Is anything, so therefore it doesn't matter. You can possibly come up with worse ones. I hope you can. I certainly can come up with worse ones about myself. But is there anything actually to be gained by doing it? Carl and I actually, in the first minute or two of that, it wasn't an interview, it was meant to be a duel, but Carl just refused to battle. He said, you're right, I agree with you. Why didn't anyone from UKIP tell me this before? And I said, well, are you bloody well thick? You stupid git. I mean, do we have to tell you when you're brought up right? I mean, you don't necessarily go out and be rude to people. It's no point and value in it. If you're making a point about freedom of speech, mate, let's talk about the fact that 85% of perpetrators of sex slavery in the UK, especially where underage girls are involved, are Muslim, or at least proclaimed to be Muslim. And of that 85%, another 85% are of Pakistani heritage or genetics. And 80%, so 70% of the total are there. Now, why did you take something like that? Why are you banging on about somebody having Down syndrome being called a retard? That's just thick. That's being retarded. And Carl, from where I'm standing, you're thick. And that's how I started off with it. He said, well, from your perspective, everyone's thick. Well, hey, perhaps that's a bit of truth which you lot can't handle. From my perspective, pretty much all of you might be thick, except I wouldn't say so, would I?
So your opinion on free speech is essentially that you will fall on the sword of free speech, but only for certain matters of conscience.
I'm not saying freedom of speech is a great power. It's a great right. We have had people dying for it. Let's not fritter it away on goddamn nonsense. Yeah, it's a useful thing to do. It's simply that. And no one's a bigger freedom of speech advocate than me, because I've got a great gob over there, and I use it frequently, often saying things which people don't like to hear, but they, I think, need to hear. But I assure you, a lady and or her daughter who've got Down syndrome do not need it broadcast to the world that they're retards.
Yeah.
And I bet all of you agree, mate. So does Carl.
Yeah, if I could just double, if I just double down on the question, because I understand, I'm not trying to like critique you, like I'm not trying to in any way say you're not somebody who's for freedom of speech. I can clearly tell you are in the interview very much.
Yeah.
The duel with Sargon clearly highlight that. What I wanted to know was
it was a surrender. Let's have a duel now. It was a surrender, mate. He gave in. He promised me a duel. When I said afterwards, why didn't you make it interesting, Carl? He said, you're gonna shred me. So I said, look, freedom of speech, mate. Let me shred you then. You can shred me as well. It's even stuff. The cameraman's neutral. Certainly John and Calamar. There was nothing about it. But hey, he didn't want to. He wanted to agree.
Yeah, but what I wanted to double down was because clearly you're very versed on like the boundaries and your knowledge of freedom of speech, and what I wanted to know was like how would you incorporate your knowledge of that more within the pie and trying to teach members and people who are in the media of UKIP, like, you know, what boundaries would be wise to like acknowledge and that like because I think a lot of people in UKIP are very heavily pro free speech and that we want to exercise as much as possible, but I think as we've the interview you did with Sargon, you highlight some good points where it's not always wise to just be brutally honest.
Well, if I was actually in the hustings in Glasgow, and one of the attendees told me there's a theatre where somebody actually shouted out fire, and there was a fire, but the way they shouted out means there was a stampede and people were killed, more people than had been killed by the fire, which would have killed no one. The stampede killed people. So that's the classic example, and it is somewhat true. But it's not about, it's just using your common sense. This is some guff which I've heard. I'm not going to attribute it to any candidate, but it did come from another candidate. That I quote Churchill, but I'm not, I don't follow it. That's bullshit. Churchill never said, never apologize, never explain. That was Disraeli, Admiral Fisher, possibly Charles I, Uncle Tom Cobley, they all said that. What Churchill said was never, 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 never yield to superior force. Never yield like that, except in matters of honor and good sense. And there's no honor and good sense in calling people with Down syndrome retards. And if you think otherwise, mate, you've been brought up wrong. So notionally, I can see on all of your faces that none of you thinks that way. It was just a mistake. And Carl was a comedian at that stage. So I don't really want to go into that. It's after he did it, when he doubled down and he did the if there's enough beer crap. Yeah, I understood it in about 1 second, what he was getting at. And it was very funny. He said, are you going to force me? And after all, he's going to make an expressive movement with his arms and say, are you going to force me to do it, to compel me to rape this poor lady? But there probably wouldn't be enough beer for it. So basically, she's a dog. That's what he's saying about. So I understand the second, but is the average voter going to understand it? No, he associates us with a party that is into rape or makes jokes about rape, which it wasn't. It wasn't a joke about rape. It wasn't. It was too complex. He wasn't being smart. My theme that evening was, oh, Benjamin, you're either an idiot or you're you're either an idiot or you're an Islamist. Which one? And he agreed he was an idiot. The alternative being that he was an Islamist. So he was making it impossible to argue against the militant.
Can I ask you, Michael, have you actually seen this Down syndrome comment? Because I haven't, so I can't defend it.
I've heard about it, but I've not actually seen it.
Because I'd love to hear someone. I'd love to hear someone try and defend that, because I literally have no idea of this comment whatsoever.
I couldn't defend it.
Back in the days, 3 or 4 years ago, yeah, it was not during his spell as a MEP candidate. It was long
do you think he should have apologized for saying that he would not rape Jess Phillips?
Hey, you want to trap me in something as illogical and silly as that? I'm not that stupid, mate. I might be looking, but I'm not stupid. What, apologize that he's not going to rape her? You're fucking mad. That is hilarious, mate. You need some of this, mate, orange juice. Now, cut off the amber nectar, mate, and stick with orange juice. Then you want to ask that scrap stupid question.
Right. So if I can just interpret what I'm hearing, it's essentially your base message would be with your principles on free speech is
no, but Michael,
I really just want to get to this, because
let's pin him down on the details.
Rape a woman. Make it clear.
Sorry.
All I'm trying to get is extrapolate from what you're saying is that it's perfectly fine to exercise free speech, but you just need to be more self-aware with what you're saying at times. I think that's the general message you're trying to give out, from what I can hear.
I think so. Just look, especially if you're trying to be a politician, you know how they be twisted. Let me tell you a valuable lesson which I learned. I learn lessons all the time. One of the lessons I'm learning now is that you lot are smart and you're very dangerous. But a lesson which I learned back 4.5 years ago, I was at Hastings, where in Chingford, in Epping Forest, a bit of London, which really seems like it used to be when Churchill used to walk around there. He was the MP for Epping and Woodford was the old constituency. It's the same one. At the Hastings, a pair of Palestinian ladies turn up. They were doing the rounds every parliamentary Hastings in the 2014-15 general election. They went and attended, everyone they could have. And they asked the question, what are you going to do about the Palestine problem? And everyone gave the boring negotiated two-state settlement stuff. So I happened to be the first one to answer that on the panel. The panel did not include Ian Duncan Smith, my Tory opponent, because there was no way his councillors were going to let him get on the same platform as I was, because I would have shredded him. So it was everyone but the Tory. So I had the first choice. I said, look, everyone's going to say the same thing. Boring, negotiated two-state settlement. That's my answer as well. You want me to tell you what I really think? In that case, you've got to give me more than the 1 minute for the answer. And I'll answer after everyone else has. Do you candidates agree? And they did, silly people that they were. So I had quite a bit more time than that. And I went into the history of the Palestine problem, which is very important. And I tried to bring out that uncontrolled mass immigration was a great factor in it, because it blooming well was. The word Palestinian did not even mean Muslim at all for more than 1,000 years. It meant it could have been a Muslim, it could have been an Arab who wasn't a Muslim, it could have been a non-Arab Muslim, it could have been a Kurd, it could have been the Druze, it could have been Zoroastrians, it could have been Christians, it could have been Jews, it could have been atheists, it could have been all sorts of things. And they by and large lived in sort of whatever past for harmony in those days. They weren't slaughtering each other in big numbers, and they lived intermingled. Then the Ottoman Empire came into it, took over, absolutely did not allow any migration into the area. They chose the wrong side in World War I, and we, unfortunately, pig in the middle, and wasn't even a halal pig, we decided we had to rule Palestine under the mandate. And we did so from 1918-19, from the end of World War I, right up to the beginning of, right up to the formation of the United Nations, etc. in 1948. We ran it. And we were not able to control it, partly because Jews, for perfectly understandable reasons, were fleeing awful mass murder persecution in Europe. So that created a lot of pressure within lands that were themselves already fully occupied. Now, I'm not going to go into the rights and wrongs of it, but it wasn't the Palestinians, who included a substantial number of Jewish people among them, who were actually doing this mass murder of Jews in Europe. It obviously wasn't. It was the Nazis, following a long tradition which had been there in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, especially. We got through our anti-Semitism. Well, we've gone back there now with the wretched Labour Party. We got through it long ago when we foolishly expelled Jews and then brought them back. Reading the book Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott gives you a good bit of the story. Now, it was mass uncontrolled immigration that led to the problems in Palestine, which are intractable. I ended up by saying, look, until each side learns to love their kids a lot more than they hate their neighbors' kids, this problem's going to continue. There's nothing we can do in Chingford about it, and we certainly can't intervene, because if we intervene, it just gets worse. Yeah, you've got to sort it out yourselves. And then I ended with a quote from Gandhi, which was, an eye for an eye leads to a world full of blind people. Went home after the Hastings, Googled my name, and I found in a certain US online paper, fortunately found in the US online paper by me before it got into print, it said the UKIP candidate was speculating about blinding Palestinian children. Now that's how one has to learn how to avoid falling into the water. And that's a lesson which perhaps Carl Benjamin, if he'd had back then, when I had it, but he wasn't a politician then. That taught me that almost whatever you say, they can try and twist it and spin it. So what you do is you try and word things to make it hard for them to pull it out of context. Oh, I raised Mary Hell. I phoned them. They were still open in New York when I called them up, and they just pulled the paper. They said, what did you say? And I said, an eye for an eye leads to a world full of, the Gandhi quote. And I said, no, it wasn't the Gandhi quote, you moron. It was the Gandhi quote. And if you're going to do it, give me the name for your service, because the next morning I'm going to serve you for libel. Yep, I have not said anything about blinding Palestinian children. You're fucking liars. But you want words like that, you can get words like that. That's how angry I was. And if you think I shouldn't be angry about like that, then there's something wrong with you, mate. And I can see you'd have used the same one. Yep, it's absolutely spot on. How dare they do stuff like that, crap like that? But they do it unless you stand up to them, because they are bullies, and bullies will continue to bully until they're stood up to. And that's something which
I agree.
I cannot stand bullying of any sort. I will always go to the underdog in cases where there's bullying. The job of a regional chairman, unfortunately, does involve this, because all political parties, I assume, I have no knowledge of others besides UKIP, do attract bullies. But this sort of lesson about how badly wrong it can go with the media. With the media, they active. I use the word media as if it's a singular, though, because they all act as if they're one. So it's the mainstream media, singular. You need to guard and be smart, just as you were saying, sir. And you have to use your common sense in knowing how to word things, otherwise it'll get twisted out of context. For example, I am willing to back up Londonistan because there are no-go areas in London where, in fact, some of them in Tower Hamlets and in Newham, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with London, where if a lady travels, and I have seen this direct experience in front of my eyes, wearing a short skirt, hey, she may get told, ma'am, very respectfully, there's a mosque here. Now, I don't want to offend people, but if I think that my ability to wear a short skirt, and I haven't done it for quite a while now, I have not done it, I will confess, I have not done that quite a while, then I would bloody well put on a short skirt and parade outside there for the right of other people to wear those short skirts outside a mosque or wherever. One law for all. It's so simple that we actually enforce that. We don't gabble about all sorts of other things which we can't enforce. We enforce that. That's not what's happened. The main concerns about people in UKIP, there was a survey run by McIntyre, the former chairman. It put Islam as number 8 or number 10. I've heard two versions of this. There were either 8 or 10 items on the list, and it was at the bottom. Now, I don't know whether this is completely true or not, or whether they fiddled it a bit. UKIP, we can never be sure. But the number 1 choice was crime, and the number 2 was immigration. Number 3 was the NHS. We link these three together in a way that the Brexit Party doesn't have the
Which do you think is the most important, Freddy? Which do you think is the largest existential threat facing the UK at the moment?
The largest existential threat to the UK? I don't think there's an existential... The question is very loaded, full marks for cleverness. There is not an existential threat to the UK right now. As in, the UK is not going to cease to exist unless somebody who hates us learns nuclear physics, in which case the whole world goes world goes pear-shaped if somebody explodes a major thermonuclear device in a large city. Yep, forget flying planes into buildings and killing a couple thousand. Terrible tragedy, awful, appalling, horrible, but I'm interested in what might happen if there was a nuke. So that would be an existential threat to Western civilization and world civilization. But aside from that, and I'm not sure we would be the main target, but we might well be a very tempting one, especially if our defenses are down. We have to have proper border control and a proper smart... We only have to get lucky once if we're talking about nukes. And I have written a letter to MI5, which means I'm probably on their permanent list now. I wrote it to them, I don't know, 20 years ago or something like that. Let me get this right. No, 18 years ago. I know exactly when I wrote it. This is that they should have not only Geiger counters.
Is it 18 or 20?
18. It's very important.
And how many days
just after 2001, mate.
Okay,
just
and how many days exactly?
The letter would have been sent in November 2001.
Okay.
After 9/11. And what I said is, I have no doubt you've got Geiger counters set up, the things which detect radiation. Yep, Geiger counters set up in the approach roads into London. For fuck's sake, put below those Geiger counters, wherever they are, weight detectors. Because even if you read Superman comics, you put enough lead or something similar, osmium, but it's too expensive, around your nuclear device, it will not be picked up by a Geiger counter, but it'll be awfully heavy. If you pack about 2 or 3 meters of lead around a big enough dirty bomb, which could take out a few 100,000 people in London and do appalling damage to the infrastructure, Western civilization would not recover from this for a very, very long time. Then you, MI5, are nuts. You have to have the two at the same point. So the truck that brings in that nuke gets picked up because it'll weigh 80, 100, 200 tons, something like that, something very extraordinary, and you stop them. The two things have to be at the same place. So there you go, mate. I wrote that. I'm a physicist. I would hope they've got physicists, but they've done so many god-awful, crazy things. They've done so many crazy things that I don't want to take the risk. So you asked about an existential threat, not you. The question about the existential threat, I do not say there's an existential threat to the UK now. However, I do my sums. And the UK will, even if all migration into and out of the UK stops, which is an extraordinary statement, because how on earth we're going to keep people in here like a prison? Because there are 6 factors working in one direction here. Because I'm going to talk about the threat, which I do not think is existential, but is nonetheless something we have to consider. I'm using my language carefully here. You said existential threat, creating a great big elephant cap. I declined to fall into it. I do apologize. I'm not just a pretty face. In fact, I'm not a pretty face at all, mate. But I just know where the holes are, where the stones are made. So
just say it, Freddy. Just say Islam. Just say
it. Yeah, this danger, maybe. There are about 6 factors working in one direction. I'll tell you what they are quickly. One is legal immigration. Yeah, involving family members, this, that, the other. The other one is illegal immigration. Third is refugees, quote unquote, whatever they may be. You may need lots of pairs of quotation marks around them, because refugees who then go back to their home country for holidays, the country which they've come here as refugees from, they're clearly not refugees, they're liars. And they're illegal and should be deported after due process. So there's 3 types. There's 3 types there. Then there's conversions, which is pretty much one way, mate. Small numbers of Muslims fall out, and very small numbers become Christians, or become just give up and become atheists. But there's a significant number, generally of Christians, and more of them Catholics, who convert to Islam. And it is not large compared to the other 3 numbers, but it is continuous. The 5th factor, operating in the same direction, is the differential birth rate. And it is a big one. According to the Office for National Statistics, from which I derive my information, it's a left-wing quango, or at least I view it as a quango. It's not going to exaggerate in the wrong way. It's going to cover it up, if anything. Then mothers who are born in Bangladesh have a total fertility rate of 3.9. In Pakistan, of 4.7, and in Somalia, it may be over 5. While native ones who call themselves white Brit, whatever that may mean, it's about 1.6, maybe 1.65. That is a gigantic factor. There is the 6th factor, which I'm going to exercise the Carl Benjamin discretion and not mention. But they all operate in one direction. There's only one operating in the other direction, mate. And that one is, sadly, largely because of this habit of consanguineous unions. That means people who are too closely related in producing offspring. Sometimes double consanguineous. That means people who aren't just first cousins. They're first cousins in 2 different ways. That means if it's Jack and Jill getting hooked up and producing offspring, which is the key thing, Jack's dad and Jill's dad being, say, brothers, and Jack's mum and Jill's mum being, say, sisters, or Jack's mother and Jill's father being siblings, and the other pair. That's like uncle-niece or aunt-nephew unions, and they are all guaranteed to produce genetic defects. The cousin ones, it's a roulette wheel. Here, it's not a roulette wheel. It's Russian roulette, where you've got 5 bullets in the gun and maybe in a 6-shooter, and one of them empty. No worries, mate. You're still on. You're still on. Now you've where it's something like that, where you have no. These consanguineous unions sadly also produce people who don't live as long. But obviously that's a tragedy. But that's the only factor operating in the other direction. Also, they tend to form, they tend to get married at younger ages and produce children at younger ages. Now, this is going to result in a demographic shift, if demographic is the right definition, because Islam, of course, is a religion. And some of them are converts who are of a different sort. Now, this is just going to happen, mate. And it's going to happen virtually irrespective of what we say, unless something major league changes. It won't change, however, as a result of us, if we are polling below the monster raving loony party. So let's fix that, mate. What you do first when if you're running businesses, now for all I know, all of you are successful businessmen, and you're all much older than me, but you've just got much better makeup artists. You'd have to have a lot better makeup artists. But let's assume that I'm actually older than you. I've had more experience in businesses. This is one which I tripped up Carl Benjamin with. So you've actually watched the entire painful interview with him. You'll have heard this one before. How do you prioritize things in business? Because you have to prioritize all the time, mate. All the time. The scarce resources, and you've got to choose between this and that, or doing this and that, or buying this and that. What do you do first? Your turn. What do you do first?
Who are you asking?
You do the easy things first, the hard things, the little things, the big things. Sorry?
You do the most important things first, right?
Nah, you do the things that have to be done first.
Almost.
Gotcha. No, yeah, it's obvious. But the obvious is what wins things, mate. And to become relevant, you have to stop losing to the monster raving loony party. Yeah, let's safely assume we're at rock bottom now. It doesn't get worse than this. So let's move it forward.
We have a by-election coming up in Sheffield. Do you think we should contest that with the way we stand at the moment?
We don't get if we don't contest elections, mate, we might as well not exist.
Yeah,
it's that people get even more micturated off. This is so I don't get any out of court context because I use words that rhyme with miss. Micturated off if we don't present them at least with the choice on the ballot paper.
Yeah, I agree.
We can become great again. We have not because our policies and manifestos are wrong, not because the deck chairs were in the wrong order, but because we had an air war which was going in completely the wrong direction. That is the major cause. Also, as Richard correctly said, and very intelligently tried to mischaracterize me as saying I was contradicting myself there, the systems within UKIP that should work, the communication system, are absolute crap. They are FUBAR. I'm almost out of words to describe how bad they are. They're just not operating. I've bypassed all of them in London. So London operates like a little semi-feudal kingdom. Not me in charge, mate, though. Where things do work, where we can communicate. But we have a big advantage. We can actually get around the table and sort this out from time to time, which is not possible elsewhere, where there's large journeys and large distances involved. We've also got some of the best people around, including Richard Bray. Absolutely so. A superb activist. And as I said, you're looking for me to make criticisms of Richard, you'll perhaps be waiting for a long time. However, I'll be a better leader than he is. That's the important one, mate, because leaders have to lead. Richard, I would hope, a very, very, very valuable person doing national stuff. It's nuts not to use him. I pushed Richard to Bolton. I went and told Bolton, you must appoint him National Communications Director immediately. Bolton said, yeah, but he then did. There were a couple of meetings, and then he rebuffed Richard, simply because Richard correctly told him that everything he was doing was crap, which it was.
Okay, Freddie, we're going to have to wrap up the stream soon.
Wrap up the stream? Oh, you old folks need your bedtime, I suppose. Good Lord.
We certainly do.
I don't go to bed till 4 a.m.
Question, Freddie. I've been reliably told, Freddie, that you only sleep for 4.5 hours a night. So
4.5 hours a night. Anything more than that, mate, it's after. And I've given up chess by and large because I need a supply of blood.
That being said, Freddie, why did you manage to sleep in for one of the hustings?
Simply because I was up and busy till 4 o'clock that blooming morning, mate. And so my 4.5 hours got me to 8.5.
Come on,
8:30.
We're in UKIP, we can all joke.
Look, mate, I've been joking all along. The point is, I do my jokes with all sorts of different faces on. So, yes, indeed.
Before we go,
all the way from Scotland, high speed.
Before we go, Freddie, we do actually have a few quick fire questions from the YouTube chat that you might want to answer. And please, if you're watching now, guys, please, now is the time to send in your questions if you want to ask Freddy something. So, Michael, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. I'll start off with a small, easy one. I'll go on to slightly more tricky ones. The smallest, well, the easiest one I found was how will you mend the growing rift within the pie? Because there are those that have a very particular view for going the pie going in one direction, and those with a view going in a very different direction. Like, how would you bring them together if you were to win?
Right. Stroking my head there and get a date of 18th of July 2018 in the Court of Appeal at around noon, shortly after noon on that day, when the court went into recess, when the three judges, the Lord Chief Justice, who is always the top of the boss of the Court of Appeal, and the two other justices of appeal, as they stood back from the court and they went through their doors and they moved their feet from outside the courtroom, I shouted out, and I assure you when I shout out, it's not a Jacob Rees-Mogg shout, it's a professorial one, not a schoolmasterly one. And I said, it is not the private individual who should be frightened of the state, it is the state who should be terrified of the private individual. So, and that was because I felt that Tommy Robinson had been a victim of rough justice at that stage. He hadn't had a fair trial, it was too fast, and the sentence far too long. So I'm not going to be alienating those people who, frankly, have done less than I have done. Which is not to say that Tommy currently isn't guilty as charged of some of the things he has. I can talk sense to both sides, and I'm simply talking fact. I do not have an axe to grind in this. I have more in common with Tommy than many people think, including his belief in the importance of a supreme being. That is something that I share with Carl Benjamin as well. He's not a bad guy, but he's a guy who is not central to the running of UKIP. We're not a personality cult, and certainly not for, well, obviously not for somebody like me, not for Gerard, not for Tommy Robinson, and we shouldn't have been for Nigel either, because half of this we went from them. That sort of approach, knocking people's head together and say, for God's sake, are you going to let the other side win because of this? Are we going to get the Limp Dems, Labour, and other people win because of your rifts over something where we don't actually have this large disagreement? We all agree that Tommy had a central point. How UKIP played it, whether Gerard was wise, stupid, somewhere in between, is really peripheral. The bigger battle is more important than that. That's how to get through to people, mate.
Okay. All right.
Thanks,
another one was, and this will be interesting to see Damien's response to this, which is, what is your view on Damien's suspension for 9 months from the party? Because I think you are aware of it.
I think he's upset some. He's ruffled feathers and upset egos. I appeared at the Damien, and you've probably been a bit harsh when you did it. You deserve a slap on the wrist, but it seems excessive to me. I went into the hearing for Luke Nash-Jones, by the way. Did you know that? This is when he and others invaded the bookshop in London. Very clever, together with Davy Trump, you know, Sumner, the guy with the Trump mask, and a few others. They assaulted one of them, only one, and not a UKIP member, assaulted the bookshop owner because it was an Antifa bookshop, they said. Good grief, we're not Nazis, we don't attack shops, we fight ideas.
If you don't mind me asking, what sort of assault? So verbally or physically, or how do you mean?
No, assault, your question is perspicacious. No, this was an actual, there was an actual shove. Further, another idiot, somebody who was a UKIP member, put the video out onto YouTube, which showed the assault. The assault was not carried out by a UKIP member. It was carried out by a man in the Trump mask, who we made sure wasn't. So I went to the disciplinary hearings in a sort of pastoral capacity for Luke Nash-Jones and Martin Costello, who were two people who were in there. There was a third UKIP member who went in. He didn't need any pastoral capacity. He needed to be expelled immediately from the party for what he said and did, including some ghastly comments he made about certain books, throwing things down, vandalism, and so on. And he was expelled. The first round didn't get it. So I'm familiar with how disciplinary proceedings look at things, and my word of advice to Damien would probably be either accept that you've done wrong or not. If you haven't done wrong, consult a lawyer or consult me. If you have done wrong, put your hands up, mate. Don't do this crap saying never apologize, never explain. Say, I'm sorry, I fucked up and I'm not going to do it again. Then they get you back in. I think, but I don't know enough about your case, mate. I think you just ruffled some people's feathers.
I have actually admitted on video that there were certain things which I apologise for to do with inaccuracies in one of my Kipper Central articles. But this was based on a lawyer's letter, and so I made the presumption that a legal letter would be entirely correct, of which that was my mistake. But
do you want to give some more details, or is it compromising for you to do so?
I think
honestly,
I think we're gonna. I think if we go into it, we're gonna go too much into the weeds, and it's going to be boring for the viewers. But I will say that I'm prepared to move past this, and also I've totally lost the thought.
When
actually,
did 9 months start? When did the 9 months start?
The 9 months have started immediately. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Even though there are certain things I apologise for, I do think this is more about me upsetting a certain person's ego on the NEC. That's all I'll say.
Is the person of the female persuasion?
They could be, Freddy. They could be.
Oh, is there some ambiguity? There are 43 possibilities running from male to female now. I'm unfortunately in one of the extremes. I'm an extremist. But my understanding is, if I'm guessing this right, and I really have only the haziest knowledge of it, it should be down to individual personalities. For example, if you tell me I'm a stupid crap, you're in perfectly safe territory, and I'll probably agree with you. Egos, this should be beyond egos. If it's a matter of you think, personally having a word with the person may have something to do with it, to diffusing it, it's probably not that simple, because as I understand in your case, they've actually made a ruling, haven't they? Which means they'd have to reverse themselves on that. They're not too hot on doing.
Well, according to the rule they've used, my case is of severe brevity or something like that, which I find quite amusing because I don't think it is whatsoever. But I think it's overblown, to be honest, and I think they've
every prison in the country is full of innocent people. Everyone thinks it's too harsh. I don't know enough to say. All I would say is, if you have made clear that you think you've done wrong, perhaps write a letter of apology to the person if it's just one person involved. But you might just have to sit it out. A leader generally would be unwise to interfere within the legal processes within the party. The NEC is a useful check and balance on a leader. Absolute power does corrupt. It's an unwise leader who runs roughshod over the NEC. I know Nigel used to, and NEC generally gave in to him on everything, except two matters which I know about. One involving a person who perhaps is a candidate for the Brexit, is an MEP for the Brexit party now, in the Southeast. And the other was a financial man. But in general, NEC's position is for a leader shouldn't interfere very much. Probably the time to do things was earlier, before you got yourself into the pickle, because presumably there was a disciplinary hearing and you were actually given to a panel. That's normal.
Well, I haven't had a hearing. I haven't had a hearing yet, Freddie, and the initial letter was.
In that case, perhaps you can talk offline. Hey, nothing promised. To me, you seem like a perfectly personable scoundrel. And we need ones just like me. If you put your foot in your mouth sometimes, but probably not done something which I haven't done either. It's upset people. No, depends on how bad you were. If you accusing them of again, because I don't know enough about it. This is not the venue for it. I think that's probably common ground. You feel that way. I'm happy to chat.
Of course.
It's not an expulsion, which is much more difficult to deal with. If it's a suspension, it's a different matter.
Yeah. Next question, Michael.
This one's popped up a lot, and I don't know much about this, so I think it'll be one quite specific for you, which is how did you get 1,400 centers without violating GDPR rules? Because apparently some people think you have a bit of a reputation for spamming emails.
What does spamming mean? If somebody has written, right, I have the provenance of each and every one of the email addresses I wrote to, and virtually everyone I wrote to, not virtually everyone, but well in excess of 70% assented. In fact, in excess of 80%. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I have maintained databases of my own for UKIP, right from the 2015 general election on the 7th of May 2015. I have obtained from public online sources the email addresses of every person who has stood as a UKIP candidate in parliamentary elections, by-elections, and in council elections. Sites like Nowadays Britain Elects and other ones have listed them. I've simply got them. These are in the public domain. If we're talking about have I broken the law, I absolutely state I haven't, for being GDPR as it now is, and what went before GDPR, which was the Protection Act. I always, once somebody tells me they don't want to get emails, they don't get emails. I mean, that's it. And afterwards, if they later change their mind, sometimes I find it's pretty hard because I don't like to mess around better. But no, this is a lie put out by a source that I know well. I'm not going to go into who it was. It's totally false without anything whatsoever. The returning officer and the party chairman have been sent proof. In fact, I sent them the initial list of more than 1,500 who came from public domain sources. These are email addresses. Now, some of the people who I have got as centaurs seem rather dubious to me because they have not been cross-checked in the party database. I'm pretty sure that there's at least 99 valid ones in the 1,435. I removed M. Mouse, and I removed somebody who was, I can't know whether the M stood for Mickey or Minnie, but there were a few other ones that are more creative. So after removing, and a few branches which were definitely dodgy, because I have no way of verifying whether they're right or not. But no, I have maintained this database completely from the UKIP one. So if we're talking about A, the law, and B, UKIP rules, which are separate things, the law I have most certainly not broken because I've been GDPR compliant throughout. When they tell me, get off, the only time I went through once early on, nothing to do with this exercise, through being careless. Somebody who had a Gmail account, and he also had registered as Google Mail with me. And when he said he wanted to get off, it's a he. I removed the Gmail one, but did also was there as Google Mail, and the two are mirrored onto each other. So then continue to send him email. How dare you do this? I'm going to have you. The police are going to come and arrest you, and this, that, and the other. I couldn't believe this happened. He was completely right, though. But there were no police in the Information Commissioner's office. We're not in the least bit interested. And then I remembered to do an additional check for additional. I think it's called spoofing, but it's legal spoofing, where the email address you send it to is automatically redirected. Now we come to the party matters. Use of the party database for any internal politicking, like with elections, is strictly prohibited, and it must be. I have never used that. I've never sent emails to London region or to my branch to any. I've never had access to the national database. I had some guy from a certain region saying, "You never had my email address," and so on. So you cannot have. You've got a party database is outside London, so I know he's on Toulouse. I do a quick check on my email system, and he's forgotten that he was in a joint email sent out to me asking for my support on sending a petition. He was not the sender, he was a recipient of that email together with me. It's perfectly legitimate for me to take email addresses from that. It's not from the party database. So I must be a failed candidate if people are taking these steps to try and get me struck off as a candidate. They're just not true at all, mate. Just not true. The 3 million emails which I sent out earlier on were not sent out using the party database, I would add.
Okay, Freddy.
This was over the course, yeah. They were to do with the 3 million, but nothing to do with this election. Yeah, next one.
Okay, I think we're going to have to wrap up the stream, actually, because the video is getting quite choppy on your end, I'm afraid. And I think that's all the juicy questions we have left for you, I'm afraid, as well. So
not a juicy question yet, mate. I want to hear some stuff about scandals, financial. I heard about a young man recently. Good knows the stuff I'm hearing about myself is incredible. It's all a bunch of, am I allowed to say horse hockey?
Please
just use something a little stronger. It's all a load of. If only I was that young, virile, and after money, but I'm actually not. I'm motivated with making sure that I've done my best, and when I pop my clogs, which hopefully won't be for a little while yet, and I've done my bit to fight, because this is a battle. I'm perfectly aware that it is one, but we have to find it smart. I hope to have Carl Benjamin right by my side when doing that. I hope to have some of you right by my side when doing it, because it's certainly not something anyone can do on their own. I don't even know whether it can be done. It is fools who have certainty. The wise have only doubts. But I have a plan. I'm not going to lay all of it out, despite Richard's charming invitation for me to do so, because our political enemies outside UKIP do listen to what we say, and one doesn't advertise some of these things before they're important. But healing the wound is the first one. Otherwise, there's going to be mass exoduses of people from UKIP. I have sorted out the. It was Richard, wasn't it, who said that if I warned that he might do something otherwise. We can't know, man.
I think he's fallen asleep, to be honest.
I think so. He's died. He's disappeared into the background there, and he keeps just turning the light going off. Oh, he's risen from the dead.
Yeah, well, I thought it'd be good to wrap it up so I can go to bed.
I know.
Yeah, we've all got to get up, but it's about I've got to get up at 6 a.m. So
we all need more than 4.5 hours.
In which case, you have 4.5 hours, mate.
Perfect.
I got the day off tomorrow. I can stay up as late as I like.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Mate. Let's hope whoever wins this, that we go through as a party and do what's needed for the country and for civilization as a whole.
Here. Thanks a lot, Freddy.
Yeah. Thanks,
See you, Freddy.
My pleasure, mate.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.